The letter was never opened. It stayed where it landed, untouched, unclaimed. Some messages wait without making a sound. No one noticed the moment it became too late. The letter rested on the same surface it had rested on since it arrived. Not hidden, not protected, simply placed, as if it were meant to be dealt with later. Its edges were clean, the paper still stiff, the fold unbroken. Nothing about it suggested urgency. Nothing asked to be done immediately. She noticed it the first day. She noticed it every day after that. Her movements around the room followed patterns she rarely questioned. The same pauses, the same quiet decisions to delay small things that felt easier to postpone than confront. Silence filled the space easily, settling into corners, into habits. The letter did not change. It did not curl. It did not slide. It did not remind. Some people might have assumed it was forgotten. Others might have believed it had already been read. No one would have guessed how carefully it was avoided. She passed by it without looking directly at it. Her eyes learned the shape of the envelope without acknowledging its presence. The way one learns furniture. The way one learns something that has been there long enough to stop demanding attention. Light shifted across the room during the day, catching the surface of the paper at different angles. Sometimes it looked brighter, sometimes dull. The letter accepted all of it without resistance. Time moved the way it always did when nothing interrupted it. Slowly, quietly, without marking itself. She found reasons not to open it. Not urgent enough, not the right moment. Some moments she believed needed preparation. Others needed distance. The letter waded through all of it. At some point, the room felt settled again. The stillness returned to its familiar shape. The day ended without anything being disturbed. The letter remained exactly where it was. Unopened. Unclaimed. Holding whatever it carried without revealing it. She believed there would be another chance to face it. Another version of the day that felt less heavy. Some people believe time made space for that. The letter stayed silent, doing what it had always done best, waiting without promise. Days continued without asking permission. They passed through the room the same way light did, touching what was visible and leaving the rest unchanged. The letter became part of the space, not important enough to move, not unimportant enough to forget. It stayed within reach, yet never close enough to require action. The distance between her and it was small, but carefully maintained. She developed ways to live around it. Small adjustments, a shift in where she placed her hands, a slight turn of her body when she crossed the room. None of it was deliberate enough to feel like avoidance. It felt natural, practiced. Some mornings, she noticed the envelope before anything else. The room still quiet, the air unmoving. The letter exactly as it had been the night before. She let her attention slide away from it, choosing instead to focus on simpler things, things that did not wait. The paper began to change, but only in ways that required time to see. A faint softness along one edge, a corner no longer perfectly sharp, nothing dramatic, nothing alarming, just enough to suggest that waiting was not without cost. She never touched it. Not once. Others might have asked why it stayed unopened. Others might have offered reasons, explanations, advice. No one did. The room remained free of voices. The silence stayed intact. She believed the letter would keep, that whatever was inside would remain the same, no matter when it was read. Some people believed words did not age if left alone. Her days filled with small repetitions, familiar motions, predictable pauses. At night, the room returned to stillness, and the letter returned to being the quietest thing in it. There were moments when she stood close enough to feel its presence without looking, a pressure without weight, a reminder without sound. Those moments never lasted long. Time did not stop for hesitation. It did not slow for uncertainty. It continued its quiet work, leaving marks only on those who stayed still. The letter stayed where it was, waiting, not insisting, not forgiving. She told herself that knowing could wait. That readiness mattered more than timing. The envelope did not react to the thought. It remained silent, letting the days do what they always did, pass without returning. Something beneath the waiting began to surface. Not suddenly, not clearly. It arrived in fragments. She started noticing the way her attention avoided the center of the room, how her eyes skimmed past the surface where the letter lay, how her body moved first, deciding for her before thought could follow. The letter had not demanded anything, yet it had begun to shape her days in subtle ways. The room felt organized around its silence. Every pause bent slightly away from it. Every moment of stillness carried a quiet tension that never named itself. There were times she almost reached for it. The motion stopped before it became visible. Her hand hovered, then lowered, as if responding to something unspoken. It was easier not to ask what held it back. The envelope showed its age more clearly now. The paper no longer looked new. The crease had softened. The color dulled just enough to be noticed by someone who had seen it every day. These changes happened without permission, without warning. She realized, slowly, that she was no longer waiting for the right moment. She was waiting for the feeling to disappear. The wait, the hesitation, the sense that opening it would make something final. Some people believed avoidance protected them, that not knowing kept things intact. She had believed that too. The letter held its shape. Its contents remained sealed. Its presence grew heavier without moving. The room seemed smaller than it once had, the silence less neutral. Even familiar routines felt slightly misaligned, as if something underneath them had shifted. She noticed how often her thoughts circled back without landing anywhere. Time had done what it always did. It moved forward without asking if she was ready. The days she thought she was saving had already been spent elsewhere. The letter had not changed her life, but it had marked it. She stood in the room one evening, aware for the first time that the waiting itself had become the choice. Not opening it was no longer passive. It was an action repeated until it felt permanent. The letter stayed where it was, holding the boundary she had drawn without ever meaning to. The change did not arrive with force. It settled in quietly, like everything else had. One day, she noticed the space around the letter more than the letter itself. The surface it rested on had faded unevenly, marked by time rather than use. The room felt worn in familiar places. shaped by repetition and restraint. She stood there longer than usual, not waiting, just present. The letter no longer felt like question. It felt like a boundary that had already been crossed without ceremony. Whatever it carried had aged beyond the moment it belonged to, not because it had changed, but because she had. There was no urgency left, no tension, only a calm awareness that something had passed without being met. The day she thought she was preserving had folded into each other, indistinguishable now. She understood then that some chances did not announce their leaving. They faded while being protected. They disappeared while being postponed. The envelope remained sealed. Its paper softer, its presence quieter than ever. She did not reach for it. The room returned to stillness, but it was different this time. Less expectant, less patient. The silence no longer felt neutral. It carried the weight of what had been allowed to settle. She moved away from the center of the room and sat where she often did. The chair accepted her without sound. The light shifted unnoticed. The letter stayed behind, doing nothing, meaning nothing, explaining nothing. It no longer needed to. She did not tell herself there would be another moment. She did not imagine a different version of the day. There was only the understanding that waiting had been the decision all along. The letter remained where it was, unopened, complete, and the room, finally, learned how to hold that truth without resistance. Not every opportunity disappears. Some simply do not return. Quietly, without warning. If you have ever thought, I should have acted then, this story may have reached you.